The day today, that didn't sound very well. The day, or today, started last night, believe it or not, at about 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock or maybe 10 o'clock time. Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, jumped on Trump Force One in Florida and flew to New York late last night so that he could start the day this morning at the New York Stock Exchange. My name is Jeff. It's West Side Jeff, sitting in for Chris Crock tonight, tomorrow, next week, next couple weeks as we're filling in for vacations. Donald Trump opened up the New York Stock Exchange today by ringing the opening bell on Wall Street. It was about an hour or so after Time Magazine had named him Person of the Year. Now, if you thought the Time Magazine was going to name him Person of the Year, raise your hand. I don't see anybody raising their hand. I wouldn't have thought that because of the disdain towards Donald Trump across the board. I would have thought it would have been maybe Elon, maybe Caitlin Clark. There could have been a lot of others that they could have selected, but I'm glad to see that it was Donald Trump because he's a mover, he's a shaker, he's somebody that has absolutely disrupted politics as we know it. As Trump rang the bell and standing up above the New York Stock Exchange, looking down, he was standing with his family and some other financial folks there. Chants of USA, USA, USA broke out. Now, one of the things that's interesting about Donald Trump, and one of the, I contend that one of the reasons that the left hates him is because of his star power. He, remember, he's about optics. He'll tell you all day long. Donald Trump is all about optics. He's a reality TV star. He worked with Mark Burnett on The Apprentice, and that's where he learned, especially, I don't know he learned it there, but he certainly fine-tuned the optics of video and the power that yields and the power and influence that a great moment, that Kodak moment, can create. So the optics of President-elect Trump opening today at the New York Stock Exchange at a time, and this is the key to this, it's at a time when the market seems strong. Ever since Trump's election win, the markets have grown significantly. We've seen positive momentum in financial markets because people are feeling better about their wallet, right? They're feeling better about the financial direction of the country. And so the market seems strong. That's on the heels of him winning the election, in large part because of kitchen table politics. Money was a significant motivator in this election. Well, Trump standing up, ringing that bell at the New York Stock Exchange at a time when markets are doing well on the heels of that election, that was driven in part by your wallet, my wallet. That offered a powerful sight. That offered a powerful visual, that offered powerful optics that you've seen across social media, that you'll see on the news tonight and tomorrow. Donald J. Trump is a media star. That's part of the reason the left doesn't like him. He learned from Mark Burnett, the producer of The Apprentice, the power that great video moments can provide and the influence that can create. That was the start of the day. As the day went on today, another top story today was the continuation of the United Healthcare, the killing of the UHC, the United Healthcare CEO. Evidence continues to mount all through the day today as law enforcement has continued to build their case for prosecution of Luigi Mangione. Now, Mangione and his attorney are still fighting extradition to New York. I've told you before, I'll tell you again, this Mangione story and the UHC assassination, the assassination of the CEO, is like a big fat onion. It's big It's fat. It has a lot of layers. You're not going to know what's under those layers until you peel it. And once you peel it, the stench gets worse. And as the stench gets worse, it's going to last quite some time. Big stories like that that hit the news will have a long shelf life. And remember, in the news business, shelf life is shorter than ever before. We're on to the next story. I would tell you, you're hard pressed to remember what the top two stories were on Monday, excluding the UHC story, because that's a story that has remained the same since last week. The story's not going to go away. But to me, one of the elements of the story of a significant news event like that, through all the significant news events that we've experienced over the last decade or so, I'm talking massive school shootings, significant big news events that have long-term shelf life. The one thing, the one commonality, the one thread that we see in those big stories is that there were warning signs all along. You know, I usually see this in plane crashes. When planes go down, when a plane goes down and several people die, you know, hundreds of people, whatever, several people die. More often than not, the crash isn't created by one thing. There's a series of things that several folks could have caught. Big school shootings, one of those. As we look back, Uvalde is one of those. You look back and you could identify a dozen things that 15, 20 different people could have caught, could have seen, could have changed the outcome of what happened. This Mangione story is like that too. One of the stories came out of that today is that his mother spent months searching for him, who didn't want to be found. She had said that he had kind of gone off the grid and gone silent and kind of drawn within. That was a warning sign, and that was a warning sign that was ignored. Some of his friends said something very similar. Again, several people saw a warning sign. So as big stories, bad things happen. What you got to understand is there's always, after the fact, the Monday morning quarterback, when the story's written, when the story has been told, you can look at it and say, you could go back at the beginning of this timeline of the story, and there's 8, 10, 12, 15, 30 things that were signs of something about ready to happen that people could have caught and they never did. That's a couple of the big stories today. Another one is something that happened in the news. And we've heard conversations that when events like this happen with United Healthcare, the assassination, the words copycat come out. And I've seen several interviews with folks along the way using the words copycat. And what they're saying is they have concerns that this was the first shooting, the first act of violence against somebody in a health insurance world that could spark some more. Might it happen? Yes, it's a maybe. One of the things that could promote that is what Senator Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders told us over the last 24 to 36 hours. I'll tell you what those are in about 3.5 minutes. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. I'm in News Talk 820, 93.3 FM, WBAP. The assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, continues to be a dominant story in the news. And you know what's interesting is we live in a shortened news cycle. There once was a time in my lifetime when a news story would hit, and that news story had shelf life of a week and a half, 2 weeks, sometimes as short as 4 days. That's not the case anymore. We, as consumers of news, in real time with social media and all the platforms we have available to us, we're on to the next story after we read it. Nothing really sticks. I use the word sticky to news. Think about stories that have dominated 2024. What stories stick out to you as sticky? I mean, it's hard to think back to this year in stories that have been dominant through the year that you can remember. I mean, can you remember what the top stories were in January or February or March? Outside of the election, of course. What about through the summer? Right as kids are getting out of school and through the summertime. What sticks out in your mind as a sticky story, something that lasted for a while? And how about in the fall? One of the sticky stories to me, obviously, that you'll remember is certainly the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. Pretty significant, sticky story that lasted a while. Well, the story about Luigi Mangione, I think, is one of those sticky stories because there's a lot of angles to this story. Obviously, the assassination is one of those. A second element of the story, as you unpeel that onion, is the fact that he has almost taken on a cultural hero type, cultural hero figure through this story. And to some, the story also is a function of the CEO deserved it because I can't tell you how many times I've seen posts that said he's killed more people than his policies, his company, his healthcare provider, the product that he represents has killed more people than Hitler or whomever, pick it. Well, the cultural hero element is one of the things that politicians are being asked about. And if you think sympathy for the devil in the Luigi Mangione case is confined just to the fever of swamps of like Reddit and deep, dark social media and deep, dark web, you've got to consider the comments by Senator Elizabeth Warren. She was asked on late Tuesday about those celebrating the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. And the Massachusetts Democrat, Senator Elizabeth Warren, called it, quote unquote, a warning. A warning. Yes, a warning. Now, when I say that, you got to ask yourself, did she mean a warning not to shoot someone? Like it's a warning for bad guys to not do that? That's not the case. Senator Elizabeth Warren on Tuesday, her response to the cultural phenomenon of Luigi Mangione said, and this is her words, the visceral response from people across this country who feel cheated, ripped off, and threatened by vile practices of their insurance companies should be a warning to everyone in the healthcare system. She goes on to say, violence is never the answer, but people can get pushed only so far. This is a warning that if you push people hard enough, they will start to take matters into their own hands in the ways that ultimately can be a threat to everyone. Now, this is a sitting U.S. senator. All through the entire Trump campaign and the election, Democrats like Warren and Bernie and AOC, all the high-profile Chuck Schumer, all the high-profile Democrats were on a regular basis talking about words matter and choose your words wisely and not to be tone deaf and to ratchet things down because they were concerned that what Republicans were saying were ratcheting things up. Remember that all through that whole summer era when Trump had an assassination attempt where he took a bullet to the ear? Now, let me repeat to you again what Senator Elizabeth Warren said when she was asked Tuesday about those who celebrate the murder of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Liz Warren said, and I'm going to interject my comments as I read some of her quote, She said the visceral response from people across this country who feel cheated, ripped off, and threatened by vile practices of their insurance companies should be a warning to everyone in the healthcare system. Now, let me go back to what she said. She goes on. She starts off and saying, people are feeling cheated. They're ripped off. They're threatened by vile V-I-L-E, vile practices of their insurance companies. They're victims is what she's saying. That's what she's saying. Let me read between lines. These people are victims of big corporate greed. That's what she said. Big corporate greed, healthcare. And she goes on to say, quote, violence is never the answer. Okay, that's a good line. Then she puts the word but in there, B-U-T. But people can be pushed only so far. This is a warning that if you push people hard enough, they will start to take matters into their own hands in ways that will ultimately be a threat to everyone. Now, let me ask you this question. Let's go back to January 6th, 3.5 years ago. If, let's see, the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO was a week ago. If a week after J6, January 6th, a high-profile Republican was asked about it, and the high-profile Republican came out and said the exact same words that Elizabeth Warren said. Let me change them just a little bit to accommodate the event. If a high-profile Republican said, the visceral response from people across this country who feel cheated, ripped off, and threatened by vile practices of political parties and political gamesmanship and weaponization of law enforcement. That should be a warning to everyone in the system. Violence is never the answer, but people can be pushed only so far. This is a warning that if you push people hard enough, they will start to take matters into their own hands in ways that will ultimately be a threat to everyone. Is that acceptable? That's Elizabeth Warren said in response to a question about Luigi Mangione becoming somewhat of a folk hero. And that's okay? No, it's not okay. Just like it wouldn't have been okay for a Republican to say that 1 week after January 6th, call it January 13th. No, don't be tone deaf. She's tone deaf. Bernie Sanders had another comment about it, and I'll tell you what that is. I got to hit the bottom of the hour news in about 2 minutes, then a 4-minute newscast on the other side of that. I'll tell you what Bernie Sanders had to say, because it's just as bad. My name is Jeff. It's West Side Jeff. In for Chris Kroc on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. So you're going to continue to hear people in the media, on television and social media, talk about their concern about copycat execution style scenarios like Luigi Mangione did with Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare. And I contend that just like Columbine was really the first big school shooting of my lifetime, I remember stunned watching that and thinking, oh my God, what if we... I remember walking through the building I was in at the radio station I worked for up in Ohio at the time. Columbus, Ohio is where I was born and raised and where I was working. Name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And I was walking through. I saw the story and I just was numb. And I sat there and watched the TV screen for a long time and thinking, how could somebody do that? And thinking, I never really thought, quite honest with you, I never really thought we'd see that again. And we've seen it a lot of times, unfortunately. It's become kind of a regular thing these days that you see school shootings. And there are people talking about the assassination of this CEO of a healthcare insurer. And I've seen people talk about, is this going to become more common? Copycat executions like that. Well, Tuesday, Senator Elizabeth Warren was asked about that on video. And again, her response was the visceral response from people across this country who feel cheated, ripped off, and threatened by vile practices of their insurance companies should be a warning to everyone in the healthcare system. She goes on to say violence is never the answer, but anytime somebody says but, it's like, okay, here's my answer, but, and they justify it. So she says people can be pushed only so far. That's a warning that if you push people hard enough, they'll start to take matters in their own hands in ways that ultimately be a threat to everyone. So, bad answer. Elizabeth Warren, you know better. Bad answer. Because what you did is validated it. You justified it. You encouraged future actions very similar to that. You used a platform to say, in essence, she's saying corporate greed of insurers. That's why we need single payer systems in healthcare and to remove that threat. That's what she was saying. And she did nothing to tamper that down. I contend that if a Republican said the exact same words, exact, word for word, only taking out the word healthcare system and putting in presidency, if somebody had said on that 7 days after January 6th, so-called January 13th, the media, the national reporting media, would have erupted. It would have been unbelievable. But that didn't happen this time around. The translation of what Senator Elizabeth Warren said is violence may be wrong. I mean, read between the lines. My story's simple. The name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. And I just give you common sense opinion on current events because common sense is missing today. And I speak the truth straight from my heart. And so many of you reach out to me across social media at Westside Jeff on X, on Facebook, on Insta, or you call the show 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. And you say, you know what, Jeff, you're saying what I'm thinking. You're saying what I'm feeling. You're just speaking from the heart. And that's exactly what I do. Well, the translation, just common man here, just a regular guy. I'm not a book smart guy. I didn't get a lot of A's and B's. I got a lot of C's. But as I translate what Elizabeth Warren said, in essence, she's saying violence may be wrong, but it's explainable by U.S. healthcare system. And copycats may be coming for the same reason. Oh, and how about passing Medicare for all, Senator? Now, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders also used Thompson's murder to legitimize and to justify that anger. He went on to say, he also was interviewed, as you might imagine, anti-capitalist Bernie Sanders said, the anger at the healthcare industry tells us, what that does is tells us that you cannot have people in the insurance industry rejecting needed healthcare for people while they make billions of dollars in profit. That's what Bernie Sanders said. So again, he's victimizing anybody that has health insurance. He's legitimizing the attempts on someone's life. And he's not condemning it. As an explanation of Mangione's act, this is all factually wrong. And it's morally incomprehensible. We don't know if Mangione was denied care or even what his specific health care complaint was. There's stories out today that he wasn't even a UHC recipient. He wasn't a UHC member. But I don't know the facts of that. I have to verify that. I don't like talking out of the cuff. But I've seen rumors of that, but I'm not totally sure. So even if he was or wasn't, the reality is we don't know if he was denied care or not. Apart from a general loathing for the system, what else is there to talk about, right? But perhaps he blames health providers for his back pain. Perhaps he says, I'm a victim. I'm going to take this guy out to make a point. But that isn't an explanation for murder, and it certainly doesn't justify it. You see, murder can't be rationalized, and a society like ours does so at its peril. This is why a healthy society establishes laws and guardrails against killing the innocent that should never be crossed. We can't cross those lines. Shooting a healthcare executive in the back is not a warning. Not at all, like Elizabeth Warren says. It's not a warning like Bernie Sanders says. It's not a warning of anything other than the illness, the mental illness, the emotional instability, the evilness of one guy. And sympathy for that, sympathy for his actions, sympathy for the act of taking it on and shooting someone in the back is a sign of degraded state of our culture and our politics. That's what that is. And both Senator Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders should be ashamed of themselves because they should denounce it, not encourage it. The right response to healthcare assassination came from, of all people, Pennsylvania Senator or Democrat Senator, he's a Democrat, John Fetterman. He had the right response. In the same story, which was in the Huffington Post, he was asked about it. He criticized what he called, quote, vile social media posts for celebrating an a-hole that's going to die in prison. That's John Fetterman. He goes on to say, if you gun someone down that you don't happen to agree with their views or their business that they're in, hey, I'm next. They're next. You're next. And people want to celebrate it. It's just twisted. Pretty odd that here we are a month after the election and John Fetterman, the Democrat senator from Pennsylvania, is the most logical one on the Democratic side. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. I'm in for Chris Crock. I'd like to hear your thoughts, your perspective on this. At the end of the day, we can't have senators talking like that. Words matter, just like they tell us. And tonality matters. You got to tone it down because otherwise we're going to have some copycats, and that's not good. Name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. I'm in for Chris Crock. You want to weigh in? I want to hear your comments. I see Tony from Grapevine. I'll get to you right after I hit a break. Tony, I'll get to you in about 3 minutes. My name's Jeff. It's Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 and 93.3 FM WBAP. Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock tonight. I'll be in tomorrow, next week, the next couple weeks as vacations mount around the station this time of the year. You can catch me across social media at Westside Jeff. You can also call me 800-288-9227. My producer tonight is Garrett Tarango. Garrett, thanks for the partnership. He's working with another guy named Matt. So, Matt, welcome aboard. In the newsroom, we got Sean Allen and John Ingham. We'll be covering you with all the details of what's going on tonight and hitting the news and just giving you analysis, opinion, and taking some phone calls we'll get to in just a second. 14 minutes from now, by the way, done some research on this United Healthcare thing. You always hear about rewards. There's a reward for this kind of information. I had to, for the heck of it, today spend some time looking that up. I was surprised what I found about those rewards, about how they get awarded, how long it takes, and the hoops you got to jump through to get the awards or the rewards. I'll tell you about that in about 14 minutes. Stick around on that. First, I want to get to Tony from Grapevine. Tony, thanks for calling. You're on with the Chris Crock Show. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. Your thoughts on the story about what the left, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, have come out and said in the last really 30 hours or so about the follow-up to the UHC killing. Your thoughts?
Good evening, Jeff. Thanks for taking my call. Let me first say, I don't think it's right to murder anyone for any reason. But what I'd like to know is, and again, it's the double standard with the left, with Democrats. If you remember a few years back, there were quote-unquote Christian fundamentalists, or I guess crazy Republicans, and they were bombing abortion clinics and killing abortion doctors. And the Democrats and the left went completely out of their mind and started condemning it and talking about how horrible it was and how it's hard, cold vigilantism. So now this is the same thing, but instead they're calling it a warning. So I mean, I don't get it. There was no outrage from them when it was abortion clinics, but when it's someone that they perceive as, I guess a left or a right-leaning Republican or whatever it is, then like you said, there's no condemnation. It's just, this is the way it is,
When it's a threat to their agenda, Tony, it's okay. Yeah. They can justify it.
Yeah.
Right? That's what you're saying. That's their agenda.
100%.
When it's a threat to their agenda.
Yeah. Anything that doesn't agree with their agenda is considered a threat, is considered, vigilantism, is considered vitriol. But when they think it's okay, then it's a warning, and it's this kind of, and I'm telling you, this is bad, and you're right. This is going to lead to more people doing this kind of stuff, and I don't get it. I mean, I just don't get it. It's sad, is what it is.
If you know what, Tony, it's interesting. If I had gone into a coma a year ago and woken up, and just this is one of the first stories I'd heard, I would have gone, wait, am I is this a nightmare? Where am I? Because this isn't the country that I grew up in. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, you're dealing with people who think that a man can turn into a woman. So what else is there to say? When you're dealing with people who are that deluded and that messed up in their head, my end all for all these kind of crazy things is Joe Biden is our president. Think about that. It doesn't get much crazier and weird and dumb than that. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is,
And what the strange thing about that is, and I didn't follow politics 40, 50 years ago, right? I'm not that old that I can look back, and I was in a political head back then, but there once was a day that Joe Biden was an extremist to the left. I mean, he was extreme left, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, for God's sakes, the man now is about as center left as they come. I mean, from a perspective that there are dozens and dozens of others in office that are a whole lot more left than he is. That's how far the left has moved.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, and I'm old. I don't know. I'm 60. I'm 66 years old. So my first vote out of high school, believe it or not, was for Jimmy Carter, and when I turned 18. And 4 years later,
we're all entitled to a mistake or two, right?
Yeah.
It's okay.
And I'm sure.
Maybe you like peanuts.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure
drinking beer and eating peanuts through school.
Yeah. Now Jimmy's happy because he won't be remembered as the worst president ever. So he'll be
spot
second.
On.
Yeah.
Tony, thank you for weighing in. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. We're talking about the story of Luigi Mangione's U.S. senators basically justifying and acknowledging his actions and saying that, in so many words, again, let me cut through the clutter. The translation of what Senator Elizabeth Warren said is, violence may be wrong, but it's explainable by the U.S. healthcare system, and copycats may be coming for the same reason. Oh, and I say, how about passing Medicare too, right? So it's a weird story, and the story's not going to go away. Got to hit the news in about 3 minutes. On the other side of that, I saw something interesting. I did some research on what a reward money looks like for this, and because there was reward money offered, and so I was curious, what's the process? What's the details of how that goes down? And I was surprised what I found out. I'll tell you that after the news. The news coming up in about 2 minutes. Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock.